Hi, it's me, Bjorn, that one guy who uploads a script every 1 to 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks like this one, like clockwork, because I'm very consistent, alright? Look, I've seen all your hate comments complaining about, ooh, Bjorn, why are you so consistent at putting things out, alright? Damn, what do y'all want? I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't, alright? And also, this isn't a green screen. I see you fuckers in the comments like, oh yeah, Bjorn, you're in front of a green screen. I'm not in front of a green screen. Does this look like a green screen? Good lord, people. Can't appreciate when a man hand makes a set. Okay, quick things before we get started. Welcome back to Writing the Suicide Squad 5. This is part 2, the second act. And it's a long one, so that's why I'm killing as much time as I can in this intro. To make it even longer, just to mess with y'all. A couple things before we get started. I know a lot of you who watch these videos aren't subscribed. If you wouldn't mind dropping a subscription down below, that would be awesome. You'll get updated whenever I post new videos, and it helps the channel out a lot. In addition to that, we also have a Discord. If you want to join that, a link will be in the description and in the comments. You can click on that and join. We have a lot of people in there who talk about franchises I write their own stuff. I'll take a look at things you write in there and give you feedback or whatever most of the time. Or you can just chat with me, say hello. I'm there frequently. Alright, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the episode.
Hey, just a reminder, this is part 2 of the 5th movie, which is a sequel in and of itself to 2 other movies I wrote. A lot of continuity with this one. So if you haven't watched those yet, link in the top. I don't know how you found yourself here, but welcome. You can catch up there. If you don't remember what happened, I might recommend catching up there. This is a very long episode, so settle in, guys. Let's go for it. We're going to open on Bloodsport pacing around the old castle in Scutarius. This is basically exactly where we left off in the first act. I just arbitrarily decided to cut it off here. In the background, we can see Flatline, Chemo, and King Shark watching the movie from before. Bloodsport, after pacing around, says, "Alright, I want some answers." And since she doesn't seem to be coming out of that room, he points to Madame Xanadu's room with Katana sitting in front of it. Bloodsport says, "You're going to have to give them to me." This time he looks towards Shade. Shade says, "What do you want to know? I owe you that much." Bloodsport asks, "That Shadow seemed interested in you most of all. Why?" The other members of the squad have begun to pay attention to the exchange. All except for King Shark, who is still watching the movie and laughing. Shade says, "To understand that, you'll have to understand me. I was not born with the name Shade. It is a title. I was born a paranoid schizophrenic. I saw things and heard noises that were not there. As I grew older, my illness became worse, until I was a madman, unable to tell reality from illusion. It was a hell I could not escape." Harley says, "Yeah, I know the feeling. It's not all bad. It's pretty fun sometimes." This time, when Shade starts to talk about his backstory, we're shown it visually. We'll say Meta is extremely colorful and has very good architecture that's very odd and unusual to really distinguish it from Earth. I'd let designers go kind of crazy with whatever they can imagine. Something wacky, something almost like Dr. Seuss maybe. Shade says, "I never found it to be fun. My world was very different from this one. We held science and magic on much the same pedestal, 2 sides of the same coin used in harmony with one another. Our greatest scientists and magi often collaborated together to create wonders unlike anything you've ever seen. The duster I wear was one such experiment. It was created as a way to siphon madness for use in powerful magic. It had been known for some time that madness was the fuel for the greatest of magics, but they had never been able to harness it until the invention of the Madness Vest. I was selected for what was then titled Project Shade and declared the first of the Shades. They wanted to harness madness in order to create soldiers for a war we'd been on the precipice of for some time. I was trained on how to kill, and then I was given the first of the prototypes. When I wore the vest for the first time, it fed off my illness and it made me sane. I was myself for the first time in my life. The power of the insanity was greater than they anticipated, and the vest began to take on a madness of its own. It would do things without prodding or command, and I couldn't control it. Until one day it dumped me in another dimension without warning. A world of sheer pitch black without a drop of light. Flatline says, "The shadow dimension." And Shade says, "Yes, I was alone in the dark, trapped by the only thing keeping my mind whole, when a voice reached out to me. It told me I was okay. That voice taught me how to use the Madness Vest, but before I left, she asked for help. She told me she'd been trapped there with no way to escape for a long time. asked me to take her with me when I left. I did. When I arrived back to Meta, I'd found that I'd taken a human with me. She was perfectly normal in every way, beautiful even. She had no memory of who or what she was, nor how she'd come to that place. And as I got to know her, we grew close. We quickly slam out of the flashback and see Harley. Oh my god, he totally fucked her. Shade says nothing. Flatline raises an eyebrow and says, oh wow, you really did. What was that even like? Shade says, normal. You don't understand. When Nightshade first crossed into my world, she had no idea what she was. She was human, smart, funny, kind. And then the shadow crept back into her, bit by bit. By the time I realized what was happening, the Nightshade I knew was gone. And it was already too late for my world. Ratcatcher says, that's so sad. Do you want a hug? The rat on her shoulder opens up its hands like it's going to hug him. Shade says, no. Ratcatcher says, do you need a hug? Shade says, still no. Ratcatcher shrugs, your loss. Shade says, I need some time to myself. These are hard things to remember. He walks off, and we see Bloodsport follow him. He catches Shade on the shoulder and pushes him to a wall out of sight of the others. He says, listen, mate, you really tried my patience. This team, I care a great deal for them. 2 of my friends died at the hands of this Nightshade, and now I find out you used to fuck her. If you get any of them hurt, I will fucking kill you. Do you understand? Shade nods, I understand. Bloodsport says, good. I hope we won't have a problem. Shade says, whatever there may have been between me and her, I promise you it is withered and gone. The things I've seen her do, you couldn't fathom. Bloodsport says, you might be surprised. Shade says, I would be. I watched her tear children apart and topple buildings with a flick of her wrist. I saw her destroy an entire world in a single day. And I cannot watch it happen again. Bloodsport says, it won't. We won't let it. Shade says, you're a good man, Dubois, and I hope you're right. I felt much the same as you before, so sure I could stop what was coming, and I was wrong. Bloodsport's phone lets out a ding. He looks down at it and is surprised. We see him open an email. It's the one Lilith Clay sent in the previous part. He opens up the file attached, and we see schematics for a machine appear. Bloodsport says, holy shit. We're gonna cut to the main chamber. We see them all standing around a table. Bloodsport says, it didn't take me long to figure this out. Look here. He pulls up a map. We see thousands of red dots all across the world. Chemo asks, what do they mean? Bloodsport points to one in Florida. They're portals. Ratcatcher says, holy shit. Harley says, that's a lot, right? Bloodsport says, a lot is an understatement. I don't even know if the Justice League could take down this many in time. God only knows where they've been. It's safe to say taking them down manually isn't an option. Chemo says, how could she even do something like this? I mean, logistically. It seems impossible. Shade says, Nightshade always had a way of getting into people's minds. I reckon whoever built these didn't realize what they were doing. Flatline says, and what do these represent? She points to 3 larger blue dots. One in the United States, one in Paris, and one in Japan. Bloodsport says, I think they have something to do with these. He pulls up the set of schematics which appear to be for some sort of massive computer. We see the whole squad studying them. Ratcatcher says, I'm gonna ask the obvious question. What do these mean? Bloodsport says, I'm not sure. This isn't really my area of expertise. I can call in some people, get the price of what it might cost to hack something like this, but if they're even real, it could be a red herring. Flatline says, don't bother. I might know a guy. He's really good at this kind of shit. Bloodsport says, perfect. Can you get me in contact with him? Flatline says, yeah, I can. She spares a look for Chemo. There's just a little hiccup. He's a bit weird. Really doesn't like men. I mean, like, won't talk to them at all. If we're going to use my guy, it has to be the ladies who go. Chemo says he hates men? Flatline says, actually, he's terrified of them. Some kind of phobia or something. He was always a bit odd. Then again, he's good at what he does. Madame Xanadu emerges from her room at last. She looks tired. She has big black circles under her eyes. Katana stands from where she waits at the door. Madame Xanadu says, it sounds like you should go. Katana tries to help Madame Xanadu when she stumbles walking out of the room. She says, I'm fine, Katana. Thank you. Flatline says, okay, so me, Ratcatcher, Harley, and Dorothy will go meet my contact. It's a plan. Madame Xanadu says, you should take Katana with you. Katana looks up in confusion. I'm needed here, to watch you. Madame Xanadu says, go with them. I've seen it. You'll be needed. Katana nods slowly, not quite understanding, but accepting what her friend says. I see. I'll join them then. We can take the ring portal. King Shark walks into the room. He says, I go too. Flatline says, you can't, Nanawe. You're a man. King Shark says, I a shark. Flatline clarifies, a shark man. I think you might actually be scarier than a normal guy. King Shark says, oh, fuck! Just like he does in The Suicide Squad. He storms off and Ratcatcher giggles. It's funny every time he does that, she says. We're going to cut to Central City. We see the portal ring open and the group of girls step out of it. They're in front of the facade to an apartment building in the middle of Central City. We see text that does say Central City, just to clarify that. Flatline says, this is it, I guess. Ratcatcher says, does your friend get scared when he looks in the mirror? Flatline says, what? Ratcatcher says, you say he's afraid of men. His mirror has got to scare him, right? Because he's a man? Flatline says, oh, I made that bit up. They enter the apartment building as the song Sunshine Superman by Donovan plays. The building is dirty and run down. Some of the lights don't work and others flicker. Flatline says, so he still lives in a shithole. Katana confusingly asks. Katana looks confused. She asks, if he isn't afraid of men, then why did you tell the others that? Well, we kinda used to date. Dorothy giggles. Harley says, oh, sneaking off to see your ex. Does Matthew know? Fallon says, no, and we're going to keep it that way. He's the exact reason I made up that bit about him not liking men. Katana says, dishonesty in a relationship is not healthy. Ratcatcher says, I don't know. I think she's fine not telling him. She could just be trying to avoid hurting his feelings. Harley says, to hell with that. I'd have them fight each other. May the best boyfriend win. Flatline says, Matthew is the best boyfriend. Trust me on that. This guy is kind of a massive dick. However, he's also very good at what he does. Ah, this is this place. She stops at the door and knocks. A young Korean man with a pair of headphones around his neck opens the door. This is his son Park. He is a character in the comics. Not really in this context, but he is a hacker and he has connections to the criminal world, if you care to look at his Wikipedia page. Beyond that, there's not really much to say about this guy. His son says, so, you came back after all. Did you miss me that much? Flatline says, ew, no. I came because I need your help. His son says, wait a minute. The great Nakia needs my help. Let me hear that one more time. Flatline says, Hassan, I need your help, you massive prick. Hassan says, I'll take that as a compliment. You always did like it. He winks, and Flatline rolls her eyes. He looks past her and sees Dorothy. Hassan says, oh shit, don't tell me she's mine. Flatline makes a disgusted face. She says, you fucking pig. Here, I need you to look at this. She hands him a flash drive. He says, whatever, come on in, I guess. He moves to a chair and plugs the flash drive into his PC. We see him pull up the schematics and files. He comes through them for a minute. Hassan says, this is fucking legit. Real tough system. Whoever made this knows their shit. Even one could support thousands of complex systems all over the world. Flatline says, can you hack it? Hassan says, well, maybe. The thing is on an internal network. You'd need some kind of root program on a flash drive. You'd have to manually plug it into the computer systems. And here they have 3 redundancy servers. You need to get all 3 down at once to shut down this network. What does something like this even operate? Flatline says, none of your business. My question stands. Can you hack it? Hassan says, yeah, I can make a hack for this. But what's in it for me? Flatline says, cash. 60,000 if you can hack it. Hassan says, give me an hour or 2. Alone. We see the squad leaving the apartment. They walk down the hall. Ratcatcher says, you used to date that guy? Flatline says, I was young. Really, really young. Ratcatcher just looks at her. Flatline adds, and stupid. Really, really stupid. Dorothy says, well, what are we supposed to do for 2 hours? They step outside and see a karaoke bar across the street. It's called the Rogues Karaoke Bar. Harley says, anyone feel like singing? We're going to cut back to Hassan's apartment. He studies the schematics once more. We see him smile to himself. He opens up a forum chat and writes a message. It says, these yours, with a picture of the schematics. We see bubbles and then a reply. Yes. Hassan types, I think I found your friends. We're going to cut back to the karaoke bar. It flashes with multicolored lights as the squad enters the building. Recent newspaper clippings and pictures of the Flash stopping the rogues litter the walls. The entire karaoke bar is themed to the superhero team and the superheroes who fight them. We see a cardboard cutout of Mirror Master and another one for Weather Wizard propped against the wall. We hear someone singing the song Beggin' by Mad Con very, very poorly. We're going to do a fun little montage of each of the squad members singing. Flatline and Ratcatcher actually sing pretty well. Harley is a total mess when she tries to sing. Dorothy and Katana just walk from the booth and don't sing. We see Harley randomly taking drinks from tables that people aren't looking, and she drinks a ton. Flatline says, wow, Harley, you're really putting those back, huh? Harley burps. You know, I like you, Flatline. You have cool clothes and you're funny. Flatline says, thanks. I think you're funny too, mostly, and I also think you should stop drinking. Harley says, no, you don't understand. I shouldn't like you. It's a problem. Everyone I like dies. I knew this guy called Deadshot. He was a friend of mine, and then he died. The guy with the javelin and the hot accent, he died. Then there was Rick Flag. He was a really nice guy. He used to lead the squad. He even came back to save me once. Can you believe it? Someone saving somebody like me. But then he died too. And now Boomer and Blocky are gone. But I am still alive. I always survive. Ratcatcher says, what matters is that your heart is in the right place. Harley says, I'd sure hope it was. I just went to the doctor a month ago. Flatline says, no. What Ratcatcher is trying to tell you is that you're trying to be good, right? That's what matters. You've gotten to live this long because you're lucky. That's all there is to it. Harley says, yeah, lucky. I used to think like that. I used to think maybe my life had some higher purpose, like destiny or something. Thought maybe it was divine blessing that kept me alive all this time. But it ain't a blessing, is it? To keep living on while everyone you love dies? Nah, it's a curse. Harley the funny cursed clown. Got a ring to it. Flatline says, you're not cursed, Harley. There's no such thing. We see Katana raise an eyebrow. Flatline adds emphasis. There is no such thing. As for your friends who are gone, well, I've seen the other side, and it's not so bad. Harley says, really? And Flatline says, really? They're probably happier than you. Harley smiles. That actually raises her mood. She says, you know what I need? Another drink. I'll be right back. Before Flatline can stop her, she stumbles off. Katana turns to Flatline. You're a bad liar. Flatline looks at her and frowns. Katana says, Harley's a good person if you can believe it. Past all the clown makeup. I appreciate what you just did. Flatline says, it's no problem. So I'm going to explain where I've decided to take Harley. I think a lot of people nag on her for having plot armor, and yeah, it's a problem. There's something really interesting that stands out to me anyway about the idea of plot armor. She has lots of friends in this franchise, and since this is a franchise where people get killed, all her friends die, but she never does. She always survives no matter what, even against the most ridiculous of odds. And I kind of wonder what that would do to a person, right? Being surrounded by people dying all the time, but you always live. And I thought that was so interesting that I decided to characterize it as Harley. So yeah, we're doing a little bit of a meta-narrative here, but I think it's a very interesting direction to take the Harley Quinn character in a way that can make her interesting again for people who have grown tired of this. And I know there's a lot of people who don't like Harley. Hopefully what I do with her going forward is interesting enough for y'all. We're going to hear the song Money Grabber by Fitz and the Tantrums start to play. Ratcatcher says, I love this song. I'm going to go dancing. I do this every mission. Ratcatcher leaves the table in a hurry and heads towards the dance floor. We're going to cut to the bar. We see Harley walk up to the bar. She asks the bartender, what's the weirdest thing you have on the menu? The bartender looks confused and says, I guess the Captain Cold is kind of weird. Harley says, I'll take 2 of those. We hear a voice ask Harley a question. It says, you look familiar. Do I know you from somewhere? Harley turns and looks, and we see Plastique sitting at the bar. Harley doesn't recognize her. They've never met. Harley says, probably. I'm kind of famous. Plastique says, really? What would I know you from? Harley says, remember that lady who robbed a bank with a pack of hyenas twice in the same week? That was me. Plastique sort of smirks and says, really? A bank robber? Like on TV? You're an actor. Harley says, yeah, sure, let's go with that. The bartender returns with her weird blue-green concoction of a drink with a cherry and a pineapple stuck in it. Harley says, it was sure nice talking to you, lady, but I gotta go. Plastique says, wait, can I buy you a drink? Harley says, I'm flattered and you're pretty hot, but I'm here with others. Plastique says, I'll buy them drinks too. Why not? Harley says, I guess that'd be okay. Plastique says, 5 more of whatever that is. Harley says, wow, 5. How'd you know? We see Plastique's face fall. She slipped up. She says, lucky guess. Harley says, really? I'm lucky too. Unfortunately. As a little callback to what she just said. Harley's too drunk to notice the slip up, really. The bartender brings the drinks on a tray and hands them to Plastique. Harley heads towards the table, and Plastique follows with the drinks in her hand. As she walks, we see her touch them one by one, priming them with her explosive touch. Harley walks up to the table and says, hey guys, this is some random lady I picked up at the bar. They all look to see who it is. None of them recognize her, except for Katana. We can see recognition fall on her face. She pulls her sword out and goes for the kill. Plastique sees it coming and uses the metal drink tray to block the attack. All the drinks go flying to the floor. Harley says, "What the hell, Katana? You're attacking my date." Katana says, "Plastique, you're supposed to be dead." Plastique says, "But I'm not." Katana leaps over the table and tries to slash Plastique again. Plastique touches her hands together and the drink glasses on the floor explode. Harley has the explosion go off in her face. We see the rest of the squad get thrown back by the blast. We follow Dorothy specifically as she's knocked to the floor and rolls. We see blood running down her face, and ringing is the only audio we can hear. The camera is blurry and shaky. Dust and smoke fills the air around her so we can't see anything. We see Sergeant Stuffy run up to her. He shakes her awake. His voice cuts through the ringing. "Get the fuck up! You've got to move if you don't want to die." Dorothy stirs and sits up. She tries to stand but falls over again. She holds a hand to her head. In the background, we see another explosion set off. Dorothy says, "My head hurts." Sergeant Stuffy says, "You've got to move, soldier! This is a war zone!" Dorothy stumbles to her feet once more. She starts to move across the club. The ringing in her ears fades, and we hear the song Money Grabber playing from half-broken speakers. We can't see Flatline, Ratcatcher, or Harley anywhere. Plastique stands in the center of the room. Katana makes a move to attack her, but is forced to dive away from an explosion. Dorothy moves forward towards an overturned table. She hides behind it and finds Ratcatcher. Ratcatcher immediately turns and checks on her. "Are you okay?" Dorothy says, "I think so, but my head is spinning and I feel nauseous." Ratcatcher says, "You probably have a concussion." Dorothy says, "I need to help." She closes her eyes. "Candlemaker, I need you." Nothing happens. Candlemaker doesn't appear. Dorothy says, "He isn't coming." Ratcatcher says, "You just hold still. The rats can help us." With one hand, she holds up her rat summoning device, and with the other, she holds Dorothy's hand. We cut to outside of the club. We see rats pouring out of the sewers. They move into the club in the hundreds. Plastique turns just in time to see them. They begin to climb up her legs. Rats explode as they touch her, but there are too many. Plastique starts to scream as the rats begin to eat her alive. She falls to the ground and the rats cover her completely. After a while, she stops moving and the rats stop exploding. Ratcatcher turns off the device. The rats all scatter away, leaving behind a bloody, half-eaten corpse. We see Flatline stand up from behind a pile of broken tables. She's got a few cuts, but is fine. Katana walks over to the body with her sword out. Flatline looks at the sword, and we can see blue-green, translucent limbs and faces trying to escape it. Flatline can see the souls trapped in the blade. This is just a fun way to remind the audience what Katana's actual power is, because we haven't really seen it in use yet. Flatline looks away and sees Dorothy. She rushes over. "Dorothy, are you okay?" Ratcatcher says, "She hit her head." Dorothy says, "I'm okay, it just hurts." Katana says, "Madame Xanadu can look after her back in Skateris." Ratcatcher stands up and looks around. She says, "Where's Harley?" They look around for a moment before Katana spots her. There. We see Harley laying sideways in a pile of rubble. Katana makes for her. She turns Harley over. Harley's badly burned and bleeding from many places, but she's breathing. Barely. Katana says, "She's alive. I have to get her back to Madame Xanadu. You take Harley and Dorothy. I have something I have to do. Me and Ratcatcher need to know how they were able to find us." Katana says, "How are you going to find that out?" Flatline says, "I'm going to ask." She nods to the corpse. Katana nods in understanding. She throws a portal ring down to the floor and says, "Skatarius." The ring spins on the floor and opens up a portal. Katana carries Harley through, and we see Dorothy follow her. As the portal closes, Dorothy looks back. Flatline turns back to the body. She reaches out and touches it. We see the bluish-green ghost of Plastique appear. "How did you know we were here?" Plastique says, "Go to hell." Flatline says, "All right, you asked for it." Flatline reaches out a hand and touches the ghost with a finger. Plastique screams in pain. Flatline pulls her hand back. "Let's try this one more time. How did you know we were here?" Plastique says, "We got a tip from a hacker." Flatline says, "What hacker?" "I don't remember. He had a foreign name. Asian something." Flatline says, "Hassan. That son of a bitch." Ratcatcher says, "I thought you trusted him." Flatline says, "Well, not exactly. Apparently. Let's go say hello." She turns back to the ghost and says, "I've seen the other side. Between you and me, you're gonna hate it." We see Plastique's eyes fill with fear as Flatline banishes her spirit. We see Madame Xanadu rushing to a bed where Harley Quinn has been laid. She casts some runes in the air and appears to heal Harley. We see some of the wounds close up, but not all the way. She's still badly hurt. Madame Xanadu turns to Katana. She will have to rest. She is gravely hurt, and I was barely able to save her. Katana nods and says, I understand. I will let no one disturb her. Xanadu says, be on your guard. The future is in flux between disaster and salvation, and my cards cannot fully see it. I need time to read the cards again. I have to read the cards again. Katana nods. Then I will stand guard and keep the others out. Katana walks out and Kimo tries to stop her. He asks, where's Flatline? What happened? Katana just says, Flatline is fine. We were ambushed. And Kimo says, by who? Katana asks, who do you think? We're going to cut back to Hassan's apartment. Flatline kicks down the door. She says, Hassan, you son of a fucking bitch. You sold us out. Hassan says, look, Nakia, I can explain. Flatline puts a knife into the table next to him. I don't want your bullshit. I want fucking answers. This thing in the schematics. Can you hack it? Hassan says, no. Flatline pulls the knife from the table. Then I guess I don't need you anymore. Hassan says, wait. I know who can. Flatline says, I'm listening. Hassan says, LexCorp. They have an invasive hacking AI. They try to keep it under wraps, but anyone who's anyone in the industry knows. They say you can plug it into any computer and it'll hack the whole system. I've heard there's not even a firewall out there that can stop it. Flatline says, is that everything you know? Hassan says, that's all, honestly. These people you're fighting, they'll know about it and they'll try to stop you. They were going to pay me a fortune for you. I don't know what you did to them, but they seriously hate you. Flatline looks at him and shakes her head. You know, you're a sack of shit. Hassan shakes his head in agreement. Flatline says, relax, dickhead. I'm not going to kill you. He lets out a sigh of relief. Flatline says, I'm just going to hurt you. She stabs a knife through his hand. Hassan screams. Flatline looks at him and says, you don't fucking sell anyone else out ever again or I'll come knocking. Come on, Ratcatcher. We're leaving. She pulls her knife free and wipes the blood off it before putting it back into her belt. We're going to cut back to Scutarius. We see Flatline standing around the table. The rest of the squad circles her. Kimo keeps looking over at her nervously. Bloodsport says, so, that's what your guy said, huh? Seems doable. Flatline says, doable? We're talking about LexCorp headquarters. The place is basically a fortress. I knew a couple of guys who tried to rob it, and they're corpses now. It's suicide. Ratcatcher says, that's kind of our thing. King Shark keeps looking back and forth from them all. He acts like he understands what they're saying, but it's very clear he doesn't. Bloodsport says, we can do this. I'll take command on this one. I know the LexCorp building well. Kimo says, you do? Bloodsport says, I used to do work for Lex Luthor. Flatline says, really? Like what? He says, shooting Superman. Ratcatcher says, that was you? You never told me. Bloodsport says, you never asked. The point of it is, I know the building. I've been in it a couple times, and my name can still probably get us through the front doors. Flatline says, okay, so we walk into one of the most heavily guarded places on Earth, and then we try to reach one of the 4 most secure servers in the world to steal a top secret hacking software we don't understand, all without triggering alarms. I don't know how we're supposed to do all that without dying. Ratcatcher says, the breaking in without triggering alarm parts will be pretty easy. My rats can take care of the electrical security. I may even be able to get a security badge or 2. Bloodsport says, the rest of us can take care of any guards we cross paths with. I think this is possible, honestly. Kimo asks, what about Nightshade? They'll know where we're going. If she tries to stop us, she'll kill us all. Remember what she did to Boomerang? Shade finally speaks up from his spot in the corner. I'll distract her. If I call her, she'll come. I can keep her attention for an hour, probably. Flatline says, even if we get the AI on a drive and escape, we'll still have to infiltrate Nightshade's computer system. God only knows what she'll have protecting it. Beyond herself. I just don't know if we can do this, guys. Kimo says, do we even have a choice, Nakia? What's the alternative? Letting the world end? Flatline nods. Fuck it, I'm in. If it really is this or the entire world, we don't really have a choice. Bloodsport says, then that's that. King Shark says, I go. LexCorp no scare me. I strong. Kimo says, as I said, I'm in. I prefer not to see the world end. Bloodsport nods his head. The world's always going to end because of something. It never does. Kimo says, I hope you're right, Dubois. Bloodsport says, get some sleep. We're going to do this in the morning. We'll need everyone well rested. Chemo and Ratcatcher head towards the hall. Flatline starts to leave, but notices Dorothy Spinner approaching Bloodsport. She stops to watch. Dorothy has a bandage wrapped around her head. She says, I want to come. Bloodsport says no. Dorothy says, but I can help. Bloodsport sighs. You could. You may even be the strongest here. But you're hurt, kid. I can't worry about you and the mission at the same time. Dorothy says, it was just a bump on the head. I promise I'm fine. I have to keep you all safe. You said I was strong. You need me. Bloodsport asks, do you trust me? Dorothy desperately says, I can help. Bloodsport says, do you trust me? Dorothy says, yeah. He says, then trust me to bring everyone out of this safely. You promise you'll be okay, she asks. Bloodsport says, I promise. Here, I found something for you. He hands her a box of comic books. They're a bit old, but I thought you might enjoy them still. Dorothy takes the box with a smile. She says, thank you. She sets the box down, then hugs Bloodsport. He looks a bit surprised. He awkwardly half hugs back. He says, now go to bed. I don't want you to reopen your wound. That's an order. Dorothy nods and takes her comic books back down the hall. Flatline approaches Bloodsport. She says, I was watching that. You know you're good with her. Bloodsport says, who? Flatline says, Dorothy. Bloodsport says, oh, she reminds me of myself in a way. She had parents who hurt her for their own pleasure. And now she's a killer. I just want a better life for her than this. You know, the one I never got. Flatline asks, you have kids of your own? Bloodsport says, a daughter. I did a shit job taking care of her. I was a bad father like my old man, watching over Dorothy and the others. It feels like a second chance to not be such a fuck-up. Flatline looks surprised. She says, you know, you remind me of another guy I used to know. Dorothy's seen a lot of shit. I think we all have. But I think more than anything, she just wants to be loved. Bloodsport nods and says, go get some sleep. You're gonna need it. We're gonna cut to Chemo's bedroom. We see Chemo half asleep laying in bed. We see it sags a bit under the weight of his giant metal suit. We see his door crack open. Flatline enters the room. She shuts the door. He looks up when he sees her. She asks, you mind if I join you? Chemo says, no, awkwardly. She slides in the bed next to him and wraps her arms around him. We see her fingers touch his metal suit. He says, that can't be comfortable. Cold metal, you know. Flatline says, actually, it might be the most comfortable place in the world right now. Chemo asks her, you okay? And Flatline says, honestly, no. I'm scared, Matthew. Chemo nods. He says, I'm scared too. All of this is so new to me. I'm not like the rest of you. I'm not cut out for this. Flatline says, that's not true. Chemo says, it is. I was just a normal guy. You trained with dead martial artists to learn how to kill for years. Bloodsport's been a mercenary for God knows how long, and Shade's from another planet or something. So of course I'm scared. But it doesn't matter. We have to do this. The world needs us, and we're the only ones who can. I can't afford to be afraid. Flatline says, you're brave, you know. Hardly a normal guy. You're a badass. She trails off and then says, and I love you. Chemo looks surprised for a second. She's never actually said that before. He thinks about it and then says, I love you too. The first time they've said it to each other. We see them drift off to sleep in each other's arms. We're going to cut to LexCorp headquarters. We see a van parked in the parking lot. We cut to the inside of the van. We see Ratcatcher open the back door and a group of rats climb into the car. They're carrying 2 security passes on their backs. Bloodsport sees them, picks them up, and studies them. He says, perfect. Shade, do you have eyes on the Nightshade? We're going to cut to Shade. He's in an alleyway. He says, I'm in position, and I've summoned her. We'll see if she comes. Cut back to the van. Bloodsport says, good enough. We go. Ratcatcher, get your rats in position. She says, they're ready whenever we are. They'll destroy any checkpoint you cross or door alarms we may open. Bloodsport says, all right then. Let's go. He throws open the back doors to the van and the team hops out. We hear the song Trouble Coming by Royal Blood play as we get our squad team-up shot. The very strange assortment of people enter the lobby of the LexCorp building. They approach the secretary in the LexCorp building. The secretary immediately looks confused at these weird gaggle of people who've shown up. He says, sir, how can I help you? Bloodsport says, I need to speak to your boss. Tell him Bloodsport is here. The boss? You mean Lex Luthor? Bloodsport nods and says, the one and only. The secretary says, I can't really call him. And then Bloodsport says, well then call who can. We do a little jump cut. We see them sitting awkwardly in the waiting room. King Shark, all of them in a line. Another woman comes out. Blonde, short hair, manager of some sort. She looks at them and is taken aback. Bloodsport says, you know who I am? He looks at her name tag. Mary. Mary says, you're Bloodsport. Bloodsport says, I am. I have a proposition for Luthor. Trust me, he'll want to hear me and my friends out. Mary says, "All right, come with me." They follow her as they pass the first security checkpoint. As she passes a closet, Bloodsport hits her with a taser, then drags her into the closet, locking her in. He takes her security card. He walks across the hall and uses it to open a door. We see a guard sitting in a chair in front of a bunch of cameras. Bloodsport hits him with the taser too. He flops over. We see Bloodsport drag him to the closet, lock him in as well. Bloodsport says, "Alright, we got a limited window to do this, and only 3 security cards. Ratcatcher, you take this one and watch the cams. You're our eyes." Ratcatcher says, "Okay." Chemo and Flatline, take this one. Ratcatcher will lead you to a terminal. Flatline asks, "What about you?" Bloodsport says, "I'll take Nanawe. I already know where a terminal is. Get that program on a drive, and we get out." "We all know the plan. Let's stick to it." Flatline nods. We follow Chemo and Flatline as they leave the cam room. Ratcatcher talks to her through her ear. Ratcatcher says, "Can you hear me?" Flatline says, "Yeah." Ratcatcher says, "You two are going to take a right." Flatline says, "Got it." She heads down the hall. Ratcatcher says, "Now a left, then another right." We see them start down the hall. We're going to cut to Shade in the alley. He stands in the empty alleyway. Suddenly, all the shadows around him begin to contort in the wrong direction. Nightshade steps out from Shade's own shadow. She runs a hand across his cheek, then looks him in the eyes and smiles. She says, "Your vest called for me. Have you come to surrender at last?" Shade says, "No. We need to talk." Nightshade says, "About what?" Shade says, "Us. You told me you still love me. Is that true?" We're going to cut back to Flatline and Chemo moving through the halls of the building. Flatline says, "This place is like a maze. Where am I going next?" Ratcatcher says, "Take a left." She says, "Wait a minute." We see guards on her monitor approaching them from behind. Ratcatcher says, "You're being followed." It's too late. The guards spot them and open fire. Chemo scoops up Flatline and blocks the bullets. Flatline says, "Well, isn't this romantic?" Chemo says, "You go. Get the drive made. I'll take care of these guys." Flatline nods and runs down the hall as Chemo tanks the bullets. He turns towards the guards. We see the fingers of his suit begin to hiss open. We're going to cut back to Bloodsport. He approaches a set of double doors. He says, "This is it." He turns back and finds King Shark is gone. He says, "Nanawe, where'd you go?" We cut to 2 minutes earlier. We see Bloodsport moving down the hall. He's followed by King Shark. They pass an open door and King Shark looks inside. He laughs to himself and walks in. We see Bloodsport keep walking forward. We see the inside of the room is filled with small tanks of water. Small cat sharks swim back and forth in the tank. The notes on the wall are for some sort of research on lateral lines. We can see diagrams explaining the shark's ability to detect movements in the water. And next to it is a schematic for some sort of suit. King Shark laughs to himself and bends down and looks at the tank. He smiles and says, "Small sharks." We cut to the present. Bloodsport looks back and forth and just says, "Fuck it. I'll find him later." He opens the double doors and enters the room. It's full of men and women in white lab coats. They spot him and look confused. Bloodsport pulls one of his pistols off his chest and fires a shot into the air. He puts it back. He yells, "Everyone out!" All the scientists flee the room except for one. She stares at Bloodsport with hate. We recognize her as Grace Baleen. They've already infiltrated LexCorp. Grace says, "Robert Dubois, Bloodsport, the leader of the Suicide Squad." Bloodsport says, "Do I know you?" She says, "No, but you knew my son, Mortimer Baleen." Bloodsport says, "I don't know him either." Grace says, "No? Well, maybe you only knew him by that silly little name he always used, Eel." Bloodsport says, "I don't know what you're on about, but you've got the wrong guy." Orca shakes her head. "I don't think I do." She begins to contort and twist her limbs. We hear bones cracking as she begins to transform into Orca. Bloodsport says, "What the fuck?" He begins to transform his gun from various pieces of armor. He's built out his whole rifle like the one he uses on Staru briefly. Orca finishes her transformation. She looks towards him and shows her teeth. They're dagger sharp like a whale's teeth now. Bloodsport opens fire, blasting her with a hail of gunfire. She seems unfazed. Even as wounds open up across her body, she continues to move forward towards him. Bloodsport runs out of ammo. He throws away his rifle and pulls out the pistols hidden in his pecs. He puts 3 rounds into her before she's on him. She swipes a clawed hand at him, but Bloodsport rolls out of the way. He fires the pistol twice more before Orca launches towards him again. Bloodsport quickly pulls a switch on his arm and a plume of fire erupts from the flamethrower there. It hits Orca, driving her back and burning her skin. She says, "I'm gonna crush you." Orca rushes him again. This time he can't dodge. She snags him by the neck and hoists him up. "Mortimer was a stupid boy." She slams him against the wall. "But he was my stupid boy. My son. Almost 17 and your people blew his fucking head off." Bloodsport says, "That wasn't me." Orca says, "They told me. Told me you were the team leader." Bloodsport pulls his sword out of his back and stabs her in the arm. Orca drops him to the floor. Bloodsport barely rolls out of the way as she slams a fist towards him. It smashes through the floor. She immediately pulls it free and charges Bloodsport as he struggles to stand. Grabbing him again, he uses his sword to stab her all the way through the shoulder. Orca doesn't even react. She hoists him up and slams him to the floor. Bloodsport groans in pain. Orca bends to a knee above him. He had dreams. Things he'll never do now. She punches him hard. His mask cracks. "He was kind." Another punch. Orca says, "He was so young and he died in agony. And for what?" Another punch. Bloodsport's mask shatters. Orca says, "I've waited a long time for this. I'm going to kill every single bastard on your suicide squad." She hits him again. Maybe then he'll be able to rest. We see Bloodsport's face. It's a ruin. Blood gurgles from his mouth. Bloodsport tries to pull his pistol out and shoot her, but she catches it, turning it towards him and shooting him in the chest. Bloodsport lets out a howl of pain through his broken mouth. Orca says, "You'll all pay." She lowers her mouth towards him, opening it up to reveal razor-sharp dagger teeth. She's going to bite his head off. She's interrupted when King Shark lumbers into the room awkwardly. Orca picks Bloodsport up, casually throws him against the wall. He slumps down, covered in his own blood. King Shark's lips pull up, revealing shark teeth. "You hurt my friend." He rushes Orca and knocks her back, and then bites her with his jaws. Blood runs from her shoulder as he sinks his teeth in deep. Orca reaches up and jams his eye. He lets out a howl and falls backwards. Orca picks up King Shark and begins to slam him into the floor over and over again. King Shark flips her over and begins to punch her in the face before slamming her head into the ground. They continue to roll around on the floor, beating and clawing and biting each other in a vicious fight until the floor gives out beneath them and they both plummet down a level. We're going to cut to 5 minutes earlier. We see Flatline moving through a hall. She enters her targeted computer room that she was being led to by Ratcatcher's rat. She says, "Bingo." She uses the lab badges they took and unlocks the system. She plugs in her flash drive and we see her shifting through files. She finally finds what she's looking for, a file labeled Project Hardic. She starts the download. We see it's taking around 3 minutes to complete. She begins to pace around the room nervously. She says, "Come on, come on, come on." We see the percentage begin to slowly tick up. 94, 95, 96. Suddenly there's a crash and King Shark comes flying through the ceiling. Orca lands next to him. They begin to fight again very quickly. We see King Shark get thrown against the computer, destroying it. We see pieces of the computer go everywhere. A piece with the flash drive inserted slides across the floor. We're not even sure if the download is completed yet. King Shark gets up and goes at Orca once more, but he's outmatched. He may be tougher, but Orca is smarter. She beats him methodically with skill and systematic fighting. Orca manages to trick King Shark into charging out a window. He falls 10 stories to the concrete below. We see Flatline quietly moving towards the flash drive. Orca hasn't seen her yet, and she wants to keep it that way. She reaches the flash drive and pulls it free. It's intact. She takes a step towards the exit and steps on a piece of broken glass. She moves towards the exit and steps on a piece of glass. It shatters. Orca looks up and sees her. She pulls her lips back into a snarl. Flatline says, "Fuck." She starts to run as fast as she can down the hall. We see the lights flickering as the power fails from the damaged computer. Red, then bright, then red, then bright. In the background, we see Orca moving towards her, getting closer and closer and closer. She's more of a monster than a human at this point. Flatline trips over a piece of rubble and falls in the middle of a four-way junction. Orca's on her now. Orca slowly lumbers up towards her, getting closer and closer. She chuckles to herself. "Another Suicide Squad member to kill." Flatline starts to try to pull out her knife, but it won't do any good and she knows it. Right as Orca is about to bear down on her, we see Chemo come running down the hall. He tackles Orca, knocking her down the other hall. He says, "Go! Get the flash drive! I'll hold her off!" Flatline runs down the other direction, leaving Chemo to fight Orca. We follow Flatline as she runs down the flashing red halls. She taps her ear and gets into her comms. "Ratcatcher, I need directions to the other terminal." Ratcatcher says, "On it." She holds up the rat device, and we see a rat appear in front of Flatline. It waves to her. Flatline says, okay. She follows the rat as it leads her to the terminal.
Flatline enters the room with another terminal. She smiles and plugs in her flash drive. She starts to download. The camera begins to slowly pan out until we see a man in a brown trench coat enter the room quietly. We hear a slight ticking play in the background.
We're gonna cut to Secretarius. We see Dorothy reading a comic on her bed. She kicks her feet happily. Suddenly, the door to her closet opens. She looks up and we see a pair of skeletal fingers gripping the door. A set of vibrant green eyes glow in the darkness. Dorothy, something terrible is going to happen. You're almost too late. His hands creep back into the darkness and his eyes wink out. Dorothy immediately jumps to her feet. She opens the closet door and finds it empty. She nods as if all this makes sense and then runs out of the room. We see Madame Xanadu flip a Toro card. Madame Xanadu is flipping Toro cards. We see a few random ones scattered on the table. It's the last one. She closes her eyes nervously and then flips it. It's a Grim Reaper. She lets out a sad gasp. The camera moves out of the door, and we see Dorothy run up to Katana, who's sitting in front of the room where Madame Xanadu is. She says, "We have to go. Something bad is going to happen." Katana says, "You're supposed to stay here. You're not going to trick me. I was given orders." Dorothy says, "You don't understand. It was the Skeleton Man. He only comes when something is going to go wrong. They're all in danger." Katana says, "They are capable. They will be fine. You just had a nightmare." Dorothy says, "No, you don't understand." Dorothy notices the portal ring on the floor. She grabs it quickly and runs. Katana follows behind her. Dorothy sees a crack in the wall and climbs through. Katana says, "No, Dorothy, it's too dangerous. You have to stay here." Dorothy says, "They're in danger, not me." She spins the ring on the floor and yells, "LexCorp." A portal opens. Dorothy jumps through and then snags the ring from the other side. We see Chemo fighting Orca. They enter a room full of cowering scientists. Orca tries and fails to damage his suit with her fists. Chemo starts to punch her as well and manages to knock her back with the force of his suit. She looks ragged and beaten but keeps going. She's driven by revenge. Chemo holds his hands out. He's going to open his suit, and then he sees the scientists. He'll kill them all if he opens his suit. They'll get hurt, die horrible deaths, and they're innocent. He lowers his fingers and forms a fist. He's going to fight her the old-fashioned way. He runs at her and throws a punch. Orca catches it and throws a punch of her own, striking him hard in his helmet. We see Chemo's head hit the back of his metal suit. He stumbles back but regains himself, shaky on his feet. He runs at Orca and tackles her to the floor. He hits her in the head twice before she gets a hit on his helmet once more. We hear the glass of his helmet strain. If she keeps this up, she'll break it. Chemo realizes what's at stake. "You have to stop. You'll kill everyone. I'm radioactive." Orca smiles. She says, "I know who you are. Radioactive. The whole squad's in this building, are they not? You're perfect." She hits the glass again, and we see a small crack start to form. It hasn't broken the seal. Chemo kicks her with his robotic legs, sending her flying. "You're insane. You'll kill everyone." Orca picks up a table and throws it at Chemo. He turns his head so it hits him on the metal side, not the glass. The force of it is enough to knock his head hard into the metal, and he falls unconscious to the floor. Orca picks up a metal chair and lumbers towards him. "For Mortimer." Suddenly, we see the portal ring open in the center of the room, and Dorothy appears. Sergeant Stuffy's on her shoulder. Dorothy cries, "Go find Bloodsport." The bear hops down and runs off. Dorothy looks to where Chemo is laying, and she makes a decision. "Candlemaker, I need you." We hear a sinister cackle and hear looming footsteps from down the hall. Orca charges Dorothy. Dorothy holds her arms over her eyes and braces, but nothing hits her. She moves her arms and looks. We see a large set of cartoon tentacles grabbing onto Orca and squeezing her tight. They drag her back away from Dorothy. Behind them, we see a full-on cartoon octopus. I want this to be like a literal animated octopus, like in live action. Maybe it's something like what's happening in The Boys with Black Noir. I think it would be really funny to have each of the imaginary friends have a completely different aesthetic. This is Dorothy's imaginary friend, who I'm calling Steven the Octopus. He talks like a cartoon, so he says, "Well, hiya, Dorothy. Don't worry, I got this under wraps." The octopus laughs to himself. "She's sure in a sticky situation." Orca says, "Let go of me, you fucking freak." Orca tries to break free, but fails. We see Chemo look up from where he got knocked down. He sees the octopus. He goes, "What the hell?" Suddenly, we hear a thumping. Candlemaker is getting closer. We see him appear down the hall. His razor-sharp claws grip the concrete ceiling as he pulls himself through the opening to the room. He says, "Dorothy, you called me." Dorothy says, "I need you to stop her." She points to Orca. Orca is still struggling to get free. She bites one of the tentacles, making it fall away. She's beginning to break free. You see Candlemaker slowly move towards her. He looks exactly like he does in his previous appearances. He begins to laugh sinisterly. "What did you do?" he asks Orca. At last he reaches her. He holds up his dripping wax claws and slowly slides them deep into Orca's chest. He pushes the claw all the way through her until it comes out her back. Blood runs all around her. With his other hand, he grabs her face and spills molten hot wax across it. Orca's screams fill the room until they fade away as she dies. Dorothy lets out a sigh, and all the imaginary friends vanish. Kima stands up and walks over to her. He says, "You okay?" Dorothy says, "Yeah. I just don't like having to kill." Kima says, "I know the feeling."
Suddenly, Sergeant Stuffy enters the room. He says, "Dorothy, you have to come with me," somberly. Dorothy looks back and forth and says, "Okay." She starts to follow him. Kima says, "I'm gonna go find Flatline. I'll meet up with you later."
We're gonna cut back to Flatline. She's noticed Clock King. I was hoping I'd see you again." She lets her knife rope fall from her sleeve. She starts spinning it in a circle. We hear the faint ticking grow a little bit louder. It plays in the background as Clock King speaks. "We don't have to fight. I never wanted to hurt you. Any of you. Just hand over the drive." Flatline says, "You burned that bridge when you murdered Croc." Clock King says, "So be it. For what it's worth, I'm sorry, but I'll do what has to be done." Clock King slides a gun out of his holster. Flatline says, "So you're gonna put me down like you put him down? With a fucking bullet?" Clock King tosses away the gun with a lack of concern. He reaches towards his belt again, and this time, he pulls a knife. The ticking grows louder. The two circle each other, waiting for the others to make the first move. We can see the hate burning in Flatline's eyes. She makes the first move, swinging her knife rope towards Clock King. He catches the attack with the blade of his own knife and deflects it. Flatline tries to pull it back towards her. Just like last time they fought, Clock King tries to grab the rope out of the air. But Flatline is prepared for it. She makes a movement with her hand, and the rope shifts the direction of the knife. It slices Clock King across the face, leaving a bleeding gash. This time, we hear Flatline's theme above all. Clock King growls and then rushes her. She sends the knife rope his way, but he dodges. He makes a couple of quick stabs towards her, but she dodges or blocks them. She retaliates with a kick to Clock King's side. He grunts. They break apart, circling each other again. "You've gotten better," he says. "You've gotten worse," Flatline says. Clock King says, "No, I've just been going easy on you. No more." We hear his ticking grow even louder. This time it's a one-sided fight. Even though Flatline is very good and gets a few hits in, Clock King dominates her. It's like he's a demon. He punches and kicks relentlessly, all while dodging most of her blows. His timing is perfect. Flatline is winded. We see she has a black eye and that blood runs from her nose and mouth from all the hits she's taken. She lets out a scream and charges Clock King. He grabs her arm and pins her to the ground. He pulls his knife out and tries to stab her in the skull. Flatline catches the knife and tries to hold it back. Clock King pushes the blade closer to her eye. Bit by bit, the ticking grows louder. Flatline kicks her legs up and knocks the knife aside. We see it carve a deep gash into the concrete next to her. She flips herself up until she's on top of him and pushes him down to the ground, all in one motion. She knocks his knife away with a kick. Now that she has him pinned, she punches him in the face over and over. Clock King is stronger than she is, however. He picks himself up with her on top of him and then throws her. She skids to the floor. Clock King stops and picks up his knife. The ticking is deafening now. He approaches Flatline. She tries to stand up. She's on all fours when he reaches her. Clock King kicks her in the gut and sends her to the floor again. He holds the knife up for a killing blow and then stops. He lets it fall to his side and then puts it back into his sheath. He says, "Don't get up. You don't have to die for nothing." She tries to stand and fails. Flatline says, "Afraid to kill me? You pussy. I'll kill you for what you did." Clock King says, "I know I deserve it, but I still have things I have to do. I can't let you yet." He picks up the flash drive she made and takes it. He smashes the console of the computer so it's unusable. He picks up his gun and slides it back into his holster, and then he turns like he's going to say something to her. He doesn't. He leaves, and we see Flatline collapse, completely defeated. She says, "Fuck." Flatline closes her eyes and then opens them as we hear a noise. Well, we can assume that some time has passed, like she passed out for a second. Chemo finds Flatline on the floor. He helps her sit up. Flatline says, "I had him, Matthew. It was right fucking there, and I lost." He hugs her with his metal suit. Again, we see her hands cling to the metal, still unable to touch him truly. Chemo says, "You're okay. That's all that matters." Flatline says, "No, it isn't. He wrecked the computer and took the drive." Chemo says, "We'll find another way." Flatline stops and thinks about it. She says, well, yeah. She reaches into her pocket and pulls out the other flash drive. He only took one. I may have gotten the download on this one. I don't know. I got interrupted. Chemo says, see? Another way. Flatline says, maybe. I gotta get up. We see Chemo help her to her feet, and they begin to limp off away from the room.
We're going to cut to Shade in the alley. Nightshade smiles, contemplating his question about love. She says, I do in my own way. I only want you to feel the same. Shade shakes his head. See, that's what confuses me. Because you never loved me. That was her. The other Nightshade. The one that I knew before you took over. I think she's still in there, somewhere deep down. But I think she wants you to stop this. All of it. I think you can be that person again. Nightshade smiles a cat-like smile. I can't be that person anymore, Shade. That person was the lie. Shade says, I don't believe you. You say you love me, and that's why you haven't killed me yet. I think she's still in there, even if she's only a whisper. Nightshade smiles again, and she says, you think I won't kill you? You are gravely mistaken, Shade. Just because I don't want to, doesn't mean I won't. Shade says, then do it. I came to end this. To end you. The shapes on his duster begin to move. Nightshade laughs. She holds up her hands, and the shadow of all the nearby buildings and trees are drawn to her. She floats off the ground, held up by the tendrils of shadow. Nightshade says, you're so sure of yourself, confident you can stop me. Sure, I am good, deep down, completely unaware of how foolish you truly are. Go on, Shade. Do what you promised. Stop me. She turns, leaves the alleyway, floating above his head, and then begins to approach a convenience store across the street. She lowers herself to the ground and approaches the entrance. Shade says, what are you doing? She doesn't answer. He chases after her. She reaches for the door slowly, with a knowing look for him. Shade grabs her shirt. He says, stop it. Shadows lurch off her back and send him flying. We see Shade catch himself with colorful energy leaking from his duster. Nightshade enters the store. Shade says, no! He runs after her. We see the inside of the store. A bell rings as Nightshade enters. We see the shadows cast by the shelves begin to change directions. The worker at the front greets her without looking up from reading a magazine. He says, hi, welcome to Quick Mart. We see a man looking at beers and a mother and her little girl picking out snacks. Nightshade casually strolls towards the man looking at beer. He sees her approaching in the reflection of the glass refrigerator and turns to look at her. He says, what do you want? Nightshade holds up a hand, and the man is torn apart by shadows. Blood sprays across the wall. Shade enters the store just in time to see the kill. He says, stop it! Nightshade refuses to talk to him. She turns towards the mother and her child as they try to run out of the store. Shadows begin to leap towards them. We see Shade throw up a colorful shield of energy around them, just as the shadows hit. The mom and her child cower and scream. Nightshade finally acknowledges Shade. She says, you said you could stop me. You think you can save everyone? Do you realize yet how wrong you are? As Shade fights to save the two people, shadows snake around to the cashier and rip him clean in two. Shade says, no! Nightshade says, I just don't think you've gotten the message yet. Let me spell it out for you. The shadows double their efforts on his shield. It's too much and it buckles. The shadows swallow the mother and her daughter. We hear the sickening sounds of crunching bone, and the screaming stops. We see blood leak from below the darkness. Shade falls to his knees. Nightshade says, do you understand now? You couldn't stop me if you wanted. The Nightshade you knew is gone. She was never real to begin with. I only care about you so much. Do not disappoint me again, Shade. Suddenly she falls to one knee. She holds a hand to her head. We see flashes of Orchid dying and of purple leaving her eyes. Nightshade says, you tricked me. This was a distraction. She vanishes into the shadows, leaving Shade alone amongst the bodies, crying.
We're gonna cut to Dorothy. She runs into the room where Bloodsport is injured. He still sits slumped against the wall. Dorothy says, hold on, I'm gonna get you help, as she slides to his side. Bloodsport says, I told you to stay behind. How are you here? Dorothy says, you needed my help, so I stole a ring. Bloodsport laughs a little. It reminds him of his daughter stealing the watch. He says, I don't think I'm gonna make it, kid. Dorothy says, no, you're gonna be okay. It's gonna be fine. Bloodsport says, I haven't done much right in my life. He coughs up blood. But this team, what we do, it's good. Ratcatcher enters the room. Ratcatcher says, I lost comms. Is everything... She trails off when she sees Bloodsport. She says, oh no. Bloodsport says, I'm fine. It's okay. Ratcatcher begins to check his wounds. You're not okay. These are too deep. Bloodsport says, look at me. I'm fine. I think I'm just gonna rest. Dorothy says, no, we have to get you out of here. I gave the portal ring to Chemo, but we can find him. Bloodsport says, I've been on a lot of battlefields, kid. I know a fatal wound when I see one. Ratcatcher begins to cry. Bloodsport says, I need you two to do something for me. Cleo, what we built was good. I want you to keep it going. You're in charge now. He hands her his transforming pistols that he keeps on his, pecs or whatever. You always had a better heart than me. I don't think you'll muck it up. The leader of the Suicide Squad. Can you do that? Ratcatcher nods. She says, I could do it. Bloodsport says, good. Go and find Chemo. It won't be long until LexCorp figures out what's happening. You need to get out of here. She leaves to go find Flatline and Chemo. Bloodsport turns to face Dorothy. She's sobbing now. You promised me you were going to come back. Bloodsport says, you're going to be okay. You're tough. Dorothy says, I don't want you to go. I won't know what to do without you. Bloodsport says, that's... He's hit by pain. I know. But you have so much potential. You'll know what's right. I see such greatness in you. All of you. Don't be like me. Be better. And he fades away and dies. Yeah, I killed Bloodsport. I did the funny. Get wrecked, nerds who like Bloodsport. I saw your polls. You thought I wouldn't notice that Clock King was the number 1 on the polls? You fools. I know you're just trying to get him killed. So I went for number 2 instead. This is your own fault. You did this. Feel the guilt. This is Sportsmaster all over again. Way to go, guys. As Dorothy cries, the camera fades to black. When it opens again, we see Dorothy sitting on her bed in Scatarius. We see her staring at the box of comics. She picks up the box and throws it across the room, and then begins to cry. We see a hand touch her shoulder. She looks up, and we see a familiar face we weren't expecting. It's Acid/Condiment King. Dorothy says, you. The imaginary Acid says, me. Dorothy says, you're not real. Go away. Imaginary Acid says, is that really what you want? You're the one who brought me to life. Dorothy says, no. I should have stopped this. I was warned and I still let him die. Acid says, you did what you could. That's what matters. You can't always save everyone. Dorothy says, I could have saved you. If only I'd realized what I could do sooner. I let you die and I let Bloodsport die. Acid says, you did save me. You probably didn't even realize that. You gave me a chance to be better than I've been in a long time. You gave that to Bloodsport too. You make people better, Dorothy. You could help so many people. Don't give up. We see Clock King arriving back at the base with Nightshade. She sits in a chair and smiles. I allowed myself to be distracted. I won't let it happen again. How was the mission? I hope it was a success. Clock King says, we lost Orca. Nightshade says, a sad loss. Miss Baleen will be missed. Was your mission a success? Clock King says, I recovered the flash drive and destroyed it. Any computer with the AI was also destroyed. The Suicide Squad left empty-handed. Nightshade says, well done. In a day's time, the world will be better, and your sister will live again. I hope so. What happened to Lilith? He asked. Nightshade frowns. She lost herself. I've locked her up in her room for her own sanity. You may go to her if you wish. Clock King nods. He says, you say you want to build a better world when this is done. But what does a better world look like? Nightshade smiles. She says, a world in which no one has to suffer. No more starvation, no more corruption, no more war. Just perfection. I see a truly pure world, freed from the flaws of humanity. Clock King asks, you really think something like that is possible? Nightshade says, I know it is. I've seen it before. And that's where we're going to end the second act. The third act is going to be our big blowout, as well as some of our big character moments. Real long episode, guys, but thanks for bearing with me so far.
Wow, that was it. That was the big one, the big penultimate episode. The sequel will come out sooner rather than later. I did do the Bloodsport killing thing, which was funny. And unrelated to that, I have a poll with some characters on there. Go ahead and tell me which ones are your favorites, guys. And don't bother lying or trying to get a certain character killed. I'm smarter than you. I saw past that, you nerds. Alright, I knew what you were up to. Okay, you can't fool me, nerds. I said that twice. I don't even care. If you're looking for something else to watch because you need more content, I've got writing a Harry Potter series right here. This is the one where I take a look at writing a Harry Potter murder mystery. It's very fun so far. And then right here, I've got Thunderbolts, a completed series where I write a Thunderbolts movie, which is similar to the Suicide Squad, but also very different. So if you're into the more comic book shit, there you go. Alright guys, I'll see you in the next one.